Hello, pro wrestling and WWE fans. Welcome to WWE and pro wrestling's Dirtiest Secrets. I'm your host, WWE fanboy Alex Cardinale. Today, I am going to be talking about the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view from October of 1999. Just like my green screen is a failure, this pay-per-view was a huge failure. Now, the concept behind the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-views were that it was going to be nostalgia for all the old wrestling fans. They were going to rely on superstars from the 1980s and early 90s. And you figure with superstars like Jimmy Superfly Snuka, King Kong Bundy, Jake the Snake Roberts, Cowboy Bob Orton, Yokozuna, and many others on the card, this pay-per-view would be decent. It would be good. But for many reasons, this pay-per-view was a huge flop, a huge failure. Now, this pay-per-view was created by somebody that is not really a wrestling fan, and he had an idea of doing a series of pay-per-view with the same concept, that it would be nostalgia based and feature superstars from the 80s and 90s, but he really didn't think it through. And I think that is part of the reason why this pay-per-view was a huge failure. Also, what led to the failure is poor quality matches from aging superstars and getting rid of Gordy Sally, a good commentator, for someone that knew nothing about wrestling. And then, of course, you've got the whole drunken Jake Roberts debacle that pretty much embarrassed pro wrestling and this pay per view. So, we're going to talk about the Heroes of Wrestling pay per view today. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about it. I'm going to talk about the aftermath of it, and I will share my thoughts on it. Before we get started, I'd like to say thank you to everybody that watched our last episode of WWE and Pro Wrestling's Dirtiest Secrets, where I talked about the murder of Bruiser Brody. That is one of my most viewed videos of 2022, and I greatly appreciate your view and your support, so thank you very much. And I'm sure this video will do quite well as well. So let's get started. If you have any thoughts on the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, please post them in the comments and I will respond to your thoughts on this pay-per-view. Now, personally speaking, I have never watched this pay-per-view, and I didn't even know it existed until someone mentioned it to me. They were like, do you know the worst wrestling pay-per-view? And I was like, no, I don't know what the worst wrestling pay-per-view is. I assumed it was a WCW pay-per-view. And he said, no, it's a pay-per-view that took place on October 1999 by the name of Heroes of Wrestling. And then he told me the superstars that were in it, like Superfly Snuka, Jake Roberts, Yokozuna, King Kong Bundy, etc. And I was like, how is that the worst? Those are all Hall of Famers. And then he told me what happened with Jake Roberts being drunk and everything that I'm going to talk about. And I was like, wow, I got to watch it. But I've been so busy that I haven't had the time to actually watch Heroes of Wrestling to give it like an actual wrestling fan point of view. But I'm going to tell you everything I have learned from researching. And just on my research, I really don't want to watch it. But because of me being a wrestling fan, I'm going to watch it. So let's learn about Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view. So, what was the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view? So, here we go. Here is what you need to know about it. So, the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view played off the recent rise in popularity of pro wrestling at the time. Bill Stone was the president of Fostoon Productions. He organized what was intended to be a series of pay-per-view events consisting of wrestling stars from the 1980s and early 1990s. Bill Stone had three subsequent pay per view shows to be broadcast on a quarterly schedule already in the planning stages if the first one achieved the break even point of of 40,000 pay-per-view buys. So Bill wanted 40,000 pay-per-view buys in order to do the other pay-per-views that he was going to do. So the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view took place on October 10th, 1999 from the Casino Magic Hotel and Casino in Bay, St. Louis, Mississippi. I have never heard of the Casino Magic Hotel and Casino. That is interesting. So we know that Bill wanted 40,000 pay-per-view buys. Well, he fell just a little short because Heroes of Wrestling only did 29,000 pay-per-view buys. So Bill Stone scrapped all future shows. In addition, Bill Stone was furious with the lackluster show itself and especially the antics of Jake the Snake Roberts. And in real life, Jake Roberts is really a snake. He is never to be trusted. At this particular time period, he was a drunk and a alcoholic and also a druggie. So he was never ever going to be sober working a wrestling event. So I personally, if I was Bill Stone, I would have not relied on Jake Roberts. So the show was critically panned and ridiculed by the wrestling press, with some going as far as calling it the worst wrestling pay per view event ever produced. Heroes of Wrestling was declared a failure by the wrestling mainstream and was recognized as the worst major wrestling pay per view of 1999 by Wrestling Observer newsletter, and throughout the years has called the tag team match between the Bushwhackers and the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov one of the worst wrestling matches ever, if not the worst. So, as you can tell, a lot of people hated Heroes of Wrestling pay per view. So, let's go over the Heroes of Wrestling pay per view match card. The first match saw the Samoan SWAT team, which consisted of Samu and the Samoan Savage, taking on Marty Jannetty and Tommy Rogers. Greg Valentine took on George the Animal Steele. Too Cool Scorpio took on Fantastico. I have no idea who Julio Fantastico is. The Bushwhackers took on the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. Tully Brancher took on Stan Lane. Abduall the Butcher took on One Man Gang. Jimmy Superfly Snuka battled Cowboy Bob Orton. And there was supposed to be a double main event with Jim Neidhart taking on Jake the Snake Roberts and Yokozuna taking on King Kong Bundy. But this is where the show turned into a failure because Jake the Snake Roberts was so intoxicated that the main event had to be turned into a tag team match. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So here are the results from the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view. The Samoan SWAT team defeated Marty Jannetty and Tommy Rogers. Greg Valentine defeated George the Animal Steel. Two Cold Scorpio defeated Julio Fantastico, whoever that is. The Bushwhackers defeated the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. Tully Blanchard defeated Stan Lane. Abduall the Butcher versus One Man Gang ended in a double countout. Jimmy Superfly Snuka defeated Cowboy Bob Orton. And Jim Neidhart and King Kong Bundy defeated Jake the Snake Roberts and Yokozuna. Now let's talk about what made Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view a failure, what made it so controversial and bad. Let's learn about that right now. So first and foremost, Heroes of Wrestling was supposed to feature a double main event, as I talked about earlier, with Jake the Snake Roberts scheduled to face Jim the Anvil Neidhart in the first match, while King Kong Bundy would take on Yokozuna in the other match. Before his match, Jake the Snake Roberts was to cut a promo in which he was supposed to taunt his opponent that night, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Jake Roberts showed up for the interview segment to set up the promo in a heavily intoxicated state, due either to a combination of alcohol and drugs or alcohol or drugs. As the interview progressed, Jake Roberts became hostile towards his interviewer and struggled to finish his promo, but because he was so intoxicated, his words were slurred. The interview became infamous not only for its unscripted nature, but for Jake Roberts' only fully intelligible sentence, an attempted analogy about playing cards as the event was being held at a casino. You don't want to play cards with me because I cheat. Okay, I cheat. You want to play 21? I've got 22. You want to play blackjack? I've got two of those too, is what Jake the Snake Roberts said. So after the interview, Jake the Snake Roberts walked to the ring with the snake he was going to use for that night's match. However, once he got to the ring, he put the snake down and walked back up the ramp. Roberts then walked back down, staggered around the ring to greet the fans, and then grabbed a female fan and had her rub her hands across his chest. He then pulled the snake out of the bag, stuck it between his legs in a suggestive manner, in a sexual manner, began stroking it, then collapsed in the middle of the ring with the snake draped over his body and tried to kiss it with his tongue. Oh, that's gross. Reptiles have salmonella, so that's disgusting, the thought of that. Anyway, in an effort to salvage the match with Jake Roberts in no condition to wrestle, the promoters announced that the match had been changed from a singles bout to a tag team match and sent out King Kong Bundy and Yokozuna to team with Neidhart and Roberts, respectively. Bundy defeated Roberts by hitting him with a splash after Jake Roberts had staggered and fallen around the ring several times. The pay-per-view immediately cut out following the match as Jake Roberts attempted to disrobe in the middle of the ring. That is classless and disgusting. He tried to become nude in the ring. The show also suffered from changes to the advertised card. The billed main event, King Kong Bundy versus Yokozuna, did not occur, and unfortunately, one of the greatest wrestling commentators, Gordon Soley, was advertised as the show's commentator, but unfortunately, he was very ill. He was starting to get ill before he passed, and he did not appear due to declining health, unfortunately. Critics panned the performance of Soley's replacement, Randy Rossblum, who appeared to have no knowledge of wrestling whatsoever. So that's smart. Bring in a guy that knows nothing about wrestling. During one match, Rosenblum called a drop kick a flying leg kick, and later as a leg drop. So that in itself would cause wrestling fans to become furious at the pay-per-view. If you got somebody that is commentating and they don't know what the heck they are doing, it's going to make the fans mad and feel like they shouldn't be watching this anymore because even the commentator doesn't know wrestling. So how are they going to tell a story in the ring? Because that is what wrestling's all about. It's about telling a story in the ring. And when you got a commentator that doesn't know wrestling, then how are you going to tell that story? As far as Jake the Snake Roberts goes, he does have a huge blame for this pay-per-view being one of the worst. If he managed to stay sober, at least for the match, then the proposed main event would have gone on and maybe it would have been good. But doing those sexually explicit taunts with that female, trying to strip nude in the ring, totally unacceptable and totally unprofessional. And that is what led to this being one of the worst pay-per-views of all time. And it is absolutely sick. I have never been a fan of Jake the Snake Roberts, and I probably never will because I find Jake the Snake Roberts to be very arrogant, disrespectful, unprofessional, and he is a total drunk. He may be sober now, but his demons may return in the future. And I'm not wishing they do, but I'm just saying history tends to repeat itself. If you don't believe me, just look at the reports of Scott Hall. I know Scott Hall recently passed away, but the reports say that he had returned to drinking and drugging before he passed away. And I guess his excuse was COVID, but demons do turn eventually. So that is very important to know. So the aftermath of this pay-per-view. There really isn't a aftermath because there was no reaction to this pay-per-view other than fan outrage. Fans were mad they bought this pay-per-view. Fans were mad they bought tickets to this, and their main events were changed. There was no quality matches, so fans were really pissed off because I'm quite sure fans viewed this as an alternate to WWE and an alternate to WCW and ECW, but they were let down dramatically as this was a shit pay-per-view. And not only because of Jake Roberts, but some of the wrestlers, my friends said, were very slow, especially Iron Sheik, and they looked like they were out of shape and they didn't belong in the ring. So this could have been like a like WWE does. WWE does Raw old school, and they have legends there. The legends don't need to be wrestling on a nostalgia show. They could have had younger superstars, and they could have done drug and alcohol testing prior to the event to make sure that Jake the Snake Roberts wasn't intoxicated when he went out there to perform for his match. So the aftermath of this pay-per-view, unfortunately, Jake the Snake Roberts deteriorated over the years. He continued to drink and drink and drink, and then eventually he sought help in early 2000s, and he was sober for quite a while. He returned to Raw in 2003 in a promo, or excuse me, he returned to Raw in 2005. So Jake Roberts returned to Raw in 2005 and did a promo with Randy Orton when Orton was feuding with The Undertaker for WrestleMania, and Jake Roberts suffered an RKO at the hands of Randy Orton. So he was doing well. I guess he then went back to his demons and became drunk again. And then eventually he found DDP's yoga, and DDP was able to save Jake the Snake Roberts, get him clean, and hopefully Jake Roberts will stay clean for the rest of his life. But Years and years of alcohol abuse can have a lot of damage to a human body. So I wish nothing but the best for Jake Roberts, even though I am not a fan of him. Now, 1 year later, in 2000, 1 year after the pay per view aired, we lost Yokozuna. Yokozuna died 1 year later. No other wrestling companies would be founded. Nobody else tried to test WCW or WWE after Heroes of Wrestling, probably because they knew that they would fail as well. So they decided to leave the market to WCW and WWE and probably ECW. A couple of years later, WCW started to fade and become terrible, and they too, like Heroes of Wrestling, stopped. Uh, they too, like Heroes of Wrestling, ceased to exist in 2001. WWE eventually became the number one brand in the United States of America, and WWE is where all the Hall of Famers are now, where all the legends go, and we get Raw, old school, SmackDown throwbacks, and appearance by Hall of Famers at WrestleMania and other WWE shows. All right, that is this episode of WWE and Pro Wrestling's Dirtiest Secrets. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please leave a like and share your thoughts on today's topic in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. So before I go, I have a couple of announcements that I would like to make. The next WWE and Pro Wrestling Dirtiest Secrets are going to talk about the Monday Night Wars and the demise of WCW. That will be next Friday. So, next Friday, join me for the next episode of WWE and Pro Wrestling's Dirtiest Secrets, the Monday Night War, and the demise of WCW. Now, we are getting ready for our next WWE pay per view, which is Hell in a Cell. So, in 2 weeks, we're going to see our first WWE Top 10 since WrestleMania season. In 2 weeks, I am going to host WWE Top 10 Best Hell in a Cell matches as we draw closer to the next premium event, Hell in a Cell. So, wrestling fans, subscribe to my YouTube channel, the legendary Alex Cardinale, so you don't miss a minute of my wrestling action, including these pro wrestling and WWE Dirtiest Secrets, WWE Top 10s, pay per view pre shows, and pay per view recap shows. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you for watching, and don't miss Monday Night Raw live this Monday on USA Network at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you for watching. So before I go, I do have a live comment that I would like to answer. Hey, Chris, how are you? I apologize for ignoring you. It's just about the end of the show, but I'm glad to see your comment. Chris says, what do you think of Sting? Sting is a legend. He is a legendary superstar, one of my personal favorites, a childhood favorite of mine. I feel that Sting was very mistreated in WWE, and unfortunately, he only had two matches and he lost to Triple H and Seth Rollins. But I'm glad that Sting is thriving in AEW. So thank you for your question, Chris. And Sting will continue to have a great career and run in AEW. Have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you for watching. Ted Hood! Sergeant Alex Cardinale here, inviting you to be a part of the inaugural Memorial Day 2022 Bash, hosted by me, Sergeant Alex Cardinale. The inaugural Memorial Day Bash airs live Monday, May 30th, 2022 at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on my YouTube channel, the legendary Alex Cardinale. The 2022 Memorial Day Bash is being hosted by me, Sergeant Alex Cardinale. And on the Memorial Day 2022 Bash, I will discuss the history of Memorial Day, and I will discuss why we celebrate Memorial Day. We're going to pay our respects to all the brave men and women out there fighting for us and this great country. USA! USA! Also on the inaugural Memorial Day Bash, I am going to address the veterans. Yes, that's right, Sergeant Alex Cardinale is going to address the veterans. We're also going to have a very special guest. That's right, we're going to have a very special guest. Former Army member James Anthony will be our very first guest for the first time ever on a holiday bash. That's going to be incredible. So we're going to speak to a former Army member as we pay our respects to the United States of America men and women who serve in our Army and in our military. There's also going to be an appearance by Chef Alex Cardinale, and Chef Alex is going to give you the best recipes to make for the veterans in your life. There'll also be an appearance by Aqua Alex, and Aqua Alex will talk about how fish tanks can help veterans. And if Chef Alex and Aqua Alex don't do the right thing, I'm going to have to put them in the camel clutch and the cobra clutch. Maggots! So the inaugural Memorial Day 2022 Bash goes down live Monday, May 30th, 2022, live 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, on my YouTube channel, the legendary Alex Cardinale. Come join me as we pay our respects to the United States military men and women, all those who serve, past or present. Don't be a maggot. Be there and be square, and let's pay respect to all the great military men and women. And that's an order. You're all dismissed.